Great. Thanks, Scott. It's good to be back. I had one of those summers that like everything that I was in the rhythm of and flow of just stopped happening. And this was one of them. So I'm really looking forward to getting a straight shot here for several months where I'll be doing this webinar twice a month again because I've missed it. So today I want to talk about completing differentiation. And this is actually a thought that came to me in my men's group last night. Because as many of you know who are in therapy or are working on healing from this, a lot comes up about your relationship and about your partner. And one of the things that struck me as I was talking to my group last night, or as we were exploring this together, I thought these guys know a bit about, or even a lot about, what they want and where they're coming from. But when I would ask questions like, why do you think your partner said that? Or where do you think that comes from? Or even, how do you feel about that being something that your partner values? The answers I would get back were either, I don't know, or because they're crazy, or it wasn't because they're crazy. It was because they're not reasonable, because they're struggling. And it struck me that in order to differentiate, which is part of it's a they say that differentiation is a necessary part of intimacy. In order to create a we, there has to be differentiated me. But oftentimes I see that the folks I work with and the couples that I work with, they stop at the defining me part and leave out the part that in order to fully differentiate, I actually have to understand, I have to be able to ascertain what makes you or something else different from me. It's not enough to say, I don't like that, or it's not me, or this doesn't feel right. Those are important first steps in differentiating. But until you can really ascertain what the differences are and why the differences are, you have not achieved full differentiation. There can't be full intimacy, or even I would say like helpful conflict, and unless you really get that other side. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is completing differentiation. So that whole like, how does differentiation lead to closeness? I think oftentimes our armchair version of differentiation doesn't, because it gets two people saying, yeah, that's not what I feel, or that's not what I like, or that doesn't feel right to me. The differentiation that leads to closeness is looking for a real definition, real truth about who your partner is. Now, if you'll notice when you're having a conflict with your partner or there's a disagreement, my guess is maybe upwards of 9 times out of 10, your initial thought about why there's a difference is not, my partner has their own experience and they came to their perspective honestly, and I'm sure that this would make sense if I could understand more where they're coming from. I'm sure that's not, like I said, there's better than a 9 out of 10 chance that that is not your first thought. It's probably more of a defensive or an angry, what's wrong with you? Why don't you see this? Why do you hate me? Why are you making this so difficult? And in order to really understand your partner, I always like what Carl Rogers said about this. If you want to get to a point where you have really healthy arguments, you need to be able to state the opposing party's side in terms that they themselves could accept. That's when you've achieved understanding. So that voice we all do when we are talking about someone who we're fed up with and the dumb thing that they said, like that voice is not the voice that speaks like kind, compassionate, complete truth about another person. And it's often a struggle to get there, because sometimes we spend so much energy butting heads and not agreeing that we really do lose good faith and goodwill with each other. This is why I think this complete differentiation is such an important skill to have in your relationships, because you really have to overcome a lot to get to a place that is fair and accurate about your partner. And just reaching that place doesn't mean that you will automatically agree. And I think that's one of the things that we fear in really understanding another side of something, is we fear that we'll have to give something up, or we can no longer keep our position. Because as I examine this, I found out you're not completely unreasonable here. Or, I found out that your position actually does make some sense. I can understand where that comes from. I think a lot of us rely on our animosity to hold on to differences. Rather, again, in that adult way, being able to hold on to a difference because it's a difference. Not that there's necessarily a right or a wrong or a good or a bad. It's just different. So you can't, your sense of what is going on for another person cannot come from assumptions, misattributions, or distortions. And that takes a lot of work to work through. And I would even put out there, you probably can't work through your assumptions, misattributions, and distortions without calibrating with the other person in some way. Really testing your theories, so to speak. Sometimes even giving the person an opportunity to explain what's going on for them. Now, it tells you a lot about where a person's at if the explanation is purely defensive, and not expositional, meaning let me show you, let me tell you. It's let me show you and tell you, and you have to think or feel a certain way. Differentiation, I think also one of the ways we fall short in thinking about this is we may confuse it with achieving identity. Achieving identity is statements like, I don't like that, that doesn't feel right, I don't want that. Because your identity is not about your relationship to anybody else. It's about just who you are, how you live and breathe. Differentiation is all about your relationship to other people. So in that way, I think differentiation has to happen over and over again. Maybe every time there's a conflict. Maybe every time you want to move collaboratively forward with somebody, whether there's a conflict or not. Coming back to that root of who is on the other side of the equation here. What do they want? Who are they? What motivates them? What's going on and why is it going on, understood in an accurate way. If you don't achieve that, you just have an echo chamber with your worst assumptions, your worst fears, your hurt, your betrayal, your sense of injustice. I'm speaking from the perspective maybe of an addict in recovery, the sense of injustice that this person who used to care about me now couldn't give two whatevers about what I'm feeling or how hard this is for me, without really activating some curiosity and empathy. You can't start to understand and see as legitimate, or at least not crazy, somebody else's perspective. And so this is a skill, and I would encourage the couples that I work with, or if you're listening, I would encourage you to come back to this again and again. Every new situation may mean there's a different part of you that I don't understand. I may get you wrong if I just go on past information. I think in many ways you literally can't spend too much time working to figure out what's going on the other side of the relationship from you, and working to hold that in a compassionate, curious way, not just the indignant way or the Reader's Digest version of your intentions or your motivations or whatever that is. But really, again, I think of that Carl Rogers statement, really understanding it in terms that the other person could accept and say, yes, you've got it. That's what's going on inside of me. So some ideas for how to complete differentiation. So if you're already in the place where you can identify what you like and don't like, what rubs you right and wrong, you've taken a really important first step. The second set of steps has to do with coming out of your worldview and your perspective and being able to make room for another, being able to make room that people are different, One of the guys in my men's group said the other night, said, I'm really embarrassed to admit this, but my takeaway from group tonight is that other people have feelings. They're just as real as mine. And, we all chuckled, and it wasn't like he'd never realized that before, but he was realizing it in a way that required something different from him, a way that was actually going to lead to some growth. That was a differentiating statement for him. Other people have feelings that are just as important as mine. So some ways that you can complete that differentiation, utilize your curiosity. Even if what you're discovering makes you mad, utilize your curiosity. It's far better that you know more surely than you're filling in the gaps with assumptions. So sometimes our curiosity has to persevere even when what we're observing or what we're finding out is upsetting. Utilize your empathy. So that whole idea, if I was in this person's position, would I have arrived at any of the same conclusions, or would I behave in a similar way? That's one really direct way of looking at empathy. I've worked with people before who have been the, identified betrayer in the relationship, only to find out later on that their partner has also betrayed them in significant ways. And it's always a little bit of an interesting session when we first start talking about that, because I'll hear things like, how could they? And that's so cruel. And why did they do that? And if I've done any amount of work with this person, I can usually have some success in turning the tables and saying, well, why did you do it? And what was going on in your head when you hurt your partner in a similar way? When you manipulate or break agreements, what's happening for you? And that doesn't necessarily diminish the anger. I think it right sizes it. I think it contextualizes it, which again is really important in differentiation. It's not I think very rarely is it a differentiated stance to say, I'm purely a victim and there is nothing I can do or should have done about this. So again, when you understand and you can really empathize, you can put on your empathy to reach understanding, you can get a more well-rounded picture of what needs to happen next. And I can't think of a more concise way to say this, but I also think it's really, really important. If you're anything like me, when you get into a conflict, I automatically assume that the other person is crazy, their brain doesn't work. They're a couple of crayons short of a box, the elevator doesn't go all the way to the top floor. So extending a generous assumption that I'm not dealing with a crazy person. And maybe, just maybe, this person isn't a liar. For a moment, it can be important to try those perspectives on and to see what you can see from there. And I know that's difficult, especially if you're a spouse who's been betrayed, to make that assumption. Maybe this person isn't lying. Not to split hairs or to make excuses, but I think there's a difference between intentional deceit and not being fully equipped with the truth. And that's often something that I discover when I'm working with, addicts. When I got into this field, therapists who had been around for a while, they'd say, well, just be prepared. Your clients are all liars and you've got to look out for that. And it's not that that's untrue. I've discovered that there's often more that's going on than willful deceit and manipulation that helps me understand what's going on the side of the other, on the other side of the room. And for many of you who have been hurt, that may be a very, very advanced skill. So know, as I'm saying that, I'm not saying go there first. I'm saying if you're in a place where you feel like you could benefit from deepening your understanding of what's going on, who your partner is, how they function, that may be a belief that might be worth suspending for a moment so that you can see what's going on. And just a side note to that, there's all sorts of things that are written about how to tell if somebody's lying, and none of them are verified by research. There is no such thing as being a human lie detector. And the evidence isn't great that like lie detection machines work 100% of the time or even captured deceit. But one thing that is, I think, a hard and fast rule with deceit is if it doesn't make sense, it's probably not true. Truth, fact has a way of, again, you don't have to agree with it or think that it's right, but it has a way of fitting in a context. So sometimes starting with that assumption, okay, maybe you're not a liar. Could you tell me more about this? That can actually give you more information that helps you determine whether or not there's deceit or lying going on, or whether there's, some kind of impairment or truncated perspective or some other difficulty going on. So to summarize, while we talk about differentiation being a first step in a relationship, it's not a beginner's step. It's actually really hard. Some of you may be overwhelmed with just the side of, well, what do I want and what do I feel? And maybe I'm dropping on your plate today a bigger load to get through is, okay, now I don't only just have to determine what I want and feel, I have to understand other people to a degree that, is accurate about them. And yeah, the job is big. Relationships are really hard. They're really complicated. But I do think breaking it down in chunks, eating the elephant one bite at a time can definitely help. And, hopefully thinking about more complete differentiation can help some of you who are watching with some places that you're struggling right now in your relationship.
Thank you, Jon. Sometimes I log in and you start talking, and I think you've been in my head like earlier today because you're talking directly to me. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I need to do this. I have something going on right now, nothing to do with much of anything except it's upsetting, and the other person is upset, and I don't know why. I can differentiate me.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I've got going on. I know what my dog in this fight is, and it's not a particularly big dog, and it's not much of a fighter. I don't understand and I have to realize that this is another person, and they have a whole lifetime of history that, and something has probably cropped up, and I may need to be curious and ask questions. And I actually liked a lot your analogy, metaphor analogy. I'll never get those right. The echo chamber of the worst case scenario. Because I will bounce around in that echo chamber with the worst possible thing ever, in my mind until I realize that there's another person involved, and this may not be all about me, or this may not, it's just there's more to it, and I need to show some curiosity sometimes.
Yeah.
And even now, I'm 20 plus years sober. I'm not good at this. I don't do it very often. Maybe I should come to your group, drive up, 6 hours to Salt Lake or whatever it is. But yeah, but this is graduate level kind of stuff, I would think. First we get sober, and then we work on underlying issues. Then we learn how to do things like this.
And at the same time, like, I really try to look at skills that you can use from day one. And I love it how that guy in my group said it. Oh, other people have feelings that are just as real for them as mine are.
Yeah.
It is something you can grab hold of on day one, even if the ability to get there easily and do it well is not there.
Yeah.
It's a really great pin to have on the map. And, right, at least to feel now, while I may be, there may be a lot of ways to do better in my relationships, I'm not fully formed, I'm not fully developed, I'm not all the way there until I can really internalize and wrap my head around other people have feelings that are just as important as mine.
Yeah. And like if you have that pin going on, even just for me realizing, oh yeah, there's two people mad this morning. I'm only one of them, and I'm not the one who's particularly mad. And yeah, and I do have the skills to say, can you tell me really what's going on? Because I'm not quite getting it. And I'd like to understand why this situation, so I can do that, but I often forget to do that. I forget that there's someone else at the party. So thank you for that reminder and also for advice on how to go about it. Let's jump into the Q&A because they are coming in. This first one is long, but I'm going to try and read it all. My sex addict partner blames me for the majority of our problems, but claims he's not blaming me. He said, "What's the point? You'll be mad at me no matter what I do." But he can't go a week sober. Initial D-Day was December 2018, but I didn't realize it was sex addiction at the time. He's been attempting sobriety for maybe a year and a half. By that, I mean he's been hiding things, gaslighting, lying, sneaking around, etc. Okay. I feel like he is malicious in a lot of his acting out as well. Subtle things I've noticed, like phrases he has texted to AO partners. I don't know what AO is, but
Acting out.
oh, acting out. Thank you. Picking fights just to act out. That is something I see guys do. They'll pick fight with their partner as an excuse to act out. His latest thing now is watching YouTube, which he has acted on repeatedly videos that he claims show nothing and aren't a big deal. Like two this morning titled "Couple
We
Caught."
might want to skip the titles on that. They might.
Oh yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, and then he knows this hurts me. Thank you, John. Creates argument, which he then says I'm causing. Why is he so mean and resentful? How do I detach from him if I can't move out? Lots of questions there, but I'm just going to turn you loose, John.
Yeah, turn me loose. There is a lot there, and this really, I think, is a good example of what early on without stability feels like. There's 50 things coming in from 70 different directions. It's really confusing and chaotic and hurtful. So to look at the last two questions, why is he so mean and resentful? I'll just say a word, and this is of course not about this person that you're talking about, because I don't know who this person is. I've never assessed them, but something that we see come up for folks who struggle with addiction is this concept of eroticized rage. And that means that the anger that I have felt that may not have been given an appropriate outlet or support in me feeling or expressing, it's gotten channeled through my sexual behavior now. So sometimes that can be overtly angry sexual behavior that's like verifiably abusive. Sometimes it can be betraying behavior, or it can be behavior that is meant to get back at a partner. So eroticized rage is, in my practice, it's a really common phenomenon. That's not to downgrade it at all. But paradoxically, I think for a lot of partners I work with, a lot of their addicted spouses actually have to work on being better at being angry as part of their overall recovery and sobriety. Because what they've done before is either this indulgent anger, which is like, I don't know, drinking all the alcohol you can find whenever you can find it. It's just not really helpful. Or they have this really displaced anger. I'll say to your face, "Oh, I'm not angry, everything's fine." And I do this stuff that's incredibly betraying and undercutting. So there can be a real disconnect. There can be a real difficulty owning the anger, and it, comes out sideways. Then the second part of the question, how do I detach if I can't move out? The most basic form of a boundary is saying how you feel. And the most basic use of saying how you feel is not actually to alter somebody else's behavior. It's to make it real for you. So I don't know the reasons why you don't feel like you can move out. Maybe you've decided that's the right thing to do, but it's not possible. I'm not here to judge that or say what you should do or not. But sometimes the only option we have for ourselves in the direction of change or improvement is to keep putting the feelings of this is not working in front of ourselves again and again, to either get something to change inside of us, or to help us see our window when there's an opportunity for something to change. So that most basic form of a boundary, I'm going to say how I feel, that's for you. I hope by connecting with your feelings consistently, I hope things become clearer. Because this kind of stuff that you're describing and what to do, I could spout off advice, but really the best direction is going to come from a really integrated, connected part of you, a deeper, wiser part of you that can figure it out. In my experience, when that wisdom isn't speaking, I probably need to connect more with my feelings. That helps clarify things.
Yeah, and I just want to add, for anybody wondering about, are YouTube videos okay? Um, when I talk to my porn addicts, and I'm a recovering porn addict myself, there's this thing that we call not porn, complete with air quotes. Not porn is not pornography. It's social media, it's YouTube, it's Game of Thrones, it's 100 other things that are used as if they're porn, but they're technically not porn. So it's very easy for an addict to be in denial. Well, I'm not looking at porn. What are you mad about? It's social media. It's YouTube. If I'm using it to get my erotic jollies, so to speak, it's porn for me. It's porn for an addict. So you have every right, at judging from the titles here, that Jon suggested I not read. Sounds like those might have been more than just not porn.
Yeah.
But even, just looking at bikini pics and things, if I'm using it to get aroused or, as part of the emotional escape that I get from my sexual arousal, I might as well be looking at porn because I'm using it just like porn. Um, it's like switching from liquor to beer. I'm still getting drunk.
That I think is completely true. I'll offer a not a differing viewpoint, another viewpoint on that too. I think whether or not it can be defined as porn or part of a cycle from a relationship perspective, if your partner is upset or concerned by something you're doing and you don't deal with it in a way that does them and you justice, you are, I can't put it any softer than this, you are failing at being in a relationship. I mean, that's a minimum requirement, is that we really hear each other's concerns out and not just put it on the shelf. But if there's a concern, we give it the airtime and the effort that it needs until we both feel satisfied with the resolution.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question, John, and this goes to differentiation because, and this came up in a session that I was doing yesterday with the guys at our house. One of the guys says his wife does not care that he uses porn. Uh, it's the fact that every time he uses porn, then he escalates into in-person acting out. So as part of it, he's trying to leave treatment with porn being like a yellow circle instead of red circle behavior, like a slippery behavior instead of a bottom line. And I always, tell these guys, you know, you say your wife doesn't mind if you look at porn. And maybe she said that once 22 years ago before she knew what you were doing. But today, and I'm, asking them to differentiate and actually let their wife today speak is very, very difficult. How do you get a guy over that hump? Just because, when you first met, she said, oh, porn's no big deal. But that was, decades ago. And now you're doing this. If she was perched on your shoulder or sitting next to you, would you be looking at porn? And they're like, no. Like, okay, why not? I mean, what do you do to get the guys to wrap their heads around? There's another person here.
Yeah, well, and also another person who changes, right? Like, I think of
Right.
stances that I took in my relationships and things that I thought, would be good forevermore when I was at the beginning of my marriage versus what I feel now. And things change. We learn more. And one angle that I would take with someone like that is to ask them, um, why is that the soundbite from the past that you're hanging on to? Why is it difficult for you to let your partner evolve and be a different person? And I would even maybe come out with the gloss off and say, this sounds really self-serving. What are the other things she said from a while ago that you don't give two craps about anymore and don't even think about? Like, why this one? And again, that comes back to that view on YouTube videos. It's not about the definition of porn. It's about when your partner has a concern, you have to give it fair airtime. It comes back to that sense of fairness in a relationship, justice, sensitivity. all the things that underpin a relationship that actually works. Holding something to someone that they said at a much less developed time a long time ago, I don't know if that's real fair. I mean, how'd you like it if she did that to you?
Thank you. I'm going to use that like verbatim. So thank you. Okay, next question here. I apologize for taking time. I've got a bunch of questions, but I did want to ask that. Sex and porn addict is an active addict, though he says he's not doing that anymore. I found magazines in the rafters just a few days ago. He doesn't take most of the expert's advice, with one exception. He tells me to focus on myself and quit worrying about what he's doing. But without me, he has no accountability because he doesn't do groups, even though he's promised to. I tell him to be trustworthy so I quit worrying about it. I'm sick of this cycle. He says he is too. So why does he keep perpetuating it?
Um, I don't know why he keeps perpetuating it. I'll just talk in general here. Generally, to leave a cycle that is long entrenched, that we can't see a way out of. One of the reasons why we can't see a way out of it, because it might involve more discomfort than we're in right now, or even more discomfort than we think we can tolerate. So the word that's sticking out to me there is accountability. And that advice to focus on your own side of the street, I think it's good recovery advice. But it's not relationship advice, and relationships and recovery are two separate things. There is no way around it. If you're going to have a satisfying relationship, there is accountability. Accountability is not the same thing as mothering and fathering each other, and it's not the same thing as looking for infractions. It's not shrinking back from asking each other, hey, what's this all about? What's going on? Tell me, who are you today? Like that's a form of accountability that good relationships, you don't get a good relationship without it. So sometimes cycles perpetuate because we may be deterred by the discomfort that we feel as we lean in a new direction. Or as we start to apply something that is generally good advice for a relationship and we get protest. It's hard to take something from somebody or to reduce something when somebody's already had it. So if accountability has not been a part of the relationship from the very beginning, to say, hey, listen, we're doing accountability now, someone might feel a loss, a freedom. And rather than facing the pain and making a decision about, are we going to step forward into something better? Stan Tatkin always says, are you going to feel better or do better? And I think the reason why he sets up that dichotomy is because often doing better doesn't feel better initially. That would be my thought on that.
The next one here. My sex addict husband has zero empathy toward me. He's a really nice guy and does everything for everyone else. But when I tell him how his addiction hurt me, he says, okay, or sends me a thumbs up. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the first thought is this the only way he's unempathetic towards you? I would be curious about shame. I'd be curious about his disconnection from his morals and values, and that doesn't excuse it at all. But generally when I'm looking at a system, I try to start with the most generous assumption I can make. And the most generous assumption I'm coming up here is I wonder if it's painful for him to face that. I wonder if it's painful enough if he doesn't have a lot of bandwidth left, or any bandwidth left, to take care of you in that moment. That's what I'd be curious about at first. If it's a larger pattern that he's really empathetic and kind to other people and not me, I would wonder about some blockages with your intimate partner. And there's not anything here that's pointing in this direction, so I'm not saying this is what's going on. We commonly see this with enmeshed men. They're good at taking care of people that they're not attached to, but you put the commitment and the attachment in, and then the care and the empathy becomes impossible. And watch some of the other webinars on enmeshment about that if you want to know why that is. I've talked about that before here, but those are some of my thoughts. Is It's quite possible there's more happening under the surface.
Yeah. He may also be getting advice about, you know, when your wife tells you how much this hurts her, acknowledge it and don't get defensive. And he may be, in his mind, acknowledging it without getting defensive. Um, so if he's listening, there's more to acknowledging than just saying okay or sending a thumbs up. There's, you know, there's being curious, there's asking to know more, there's trying to feel it with your partner. Um, but I, you know, but if that's the advice that he's operating on, I'll give him a kudos for not getting defensive. But there's more to the acknowledging part than just the thumbs up. Um, so I don't know. Do you run into that sometimes, John, where guys don't want to get defensive, so they just clam up?
Yeah, yeah. Again, like that would be, maybe in the category of a people-pleasing behavior. I'm trying to avoid some kind of conflict or confrontation, and I do think empathy is confrontational.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Getting in somebody's pain with them takes effort. You know. What about when the addict with enmeshment issues, now in recovery, is realizing that they have never really thought about or established what they want and need? So,
Yeah, it's becoming clearer and clearer to me that enmeshment is a profound form of abuse. If you think of other ways that people's personhood gets erased, it's not like homo stressful sometimes. It's like profound abuse erases personhood. And for a lot of the enmesh guys that I work with who also struggle with addiction, that's one of the functions that their addiction serves, is to protect them from feeling that void inside of themselves. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I want. And we say in recovery, if you want to know what you're running from, stop running. And sometimes this is the exact same thing that catches these guys who the root of the problem is enmeshment. They've coped with addiction. That's often one of the realizations that emerges, and it's really painful.
yeah,
It's really, really painful.
yeah. I mean, I remember early recovery for me. I realized that I had no idea who I was, and that I never had because I'd never had a self before. And it was uncomfortable to sit there and see the void and wonder what I was supposed to do with it. It's very difficult. Um, so yeah. Should a sex addict ever go back to activities like watching PG-13 or worse TV? He says he's not triggered anymore, that it's me that's triggered.
Yeah, I can't address the first part of that question because there's a superlative in there.
Ever.
So yeah, what I would say to that is that would be between the person in recovery, their sponsor, and their higher power. Um, the thing that's sticking out to me is he says he's not triggered anymore. It's me that's triggered. So if this person's watching, I'm going to speak directly to you. Great. We would hope at some point in your recovery that things that used to sink you don't sink you anymore. We would hope that you would feel some resiliency. Now, why are you treating your partner the way that you are when they're triggered? Why is that getting disdain? Why is that not getting compassion? Do you really believe that you broke it? In other words, that a lot of these triggers come from me and my behavior. That's the genesis, even if I'm not doing it anymore. The reason why this is bothersome to you is because I used it in a way that hurt you and betrayed you. So, I'd say, where's the sensitivity, man? Uh, awesome if you're feeling free from it. I think that often happens where the addict may start to feel more stable and more free before their partner trusts that. You might want to think about what a move for trust and support it can be in a relationship to say, if that's not something that you can tolerate right now, I can totally wrap my head around that not being a part of my life. I'm happy to do that for you.
Yeah, I always tell the guys, if it upsets your wife, don't do it. I mean, even if
Why?
it's not triggering to you, don't do it anyway.
And in all honesty, of all the things that you could take a stand on in your life and like fight
Yeah,
back on,
PG-13.
I don't know that what you watch on TV is the most important thing.
Is this the hill you want to die on?
Pick,
Maybe not.
pick a better hill. if you got to die on a hill, like pick something more epic than, watching whatever.
You there?
Oh, we back? No. Uh, okay, I think we're back.
Yeah, my internet is showing me that I'm a little wonky here. Sorry about that. Okay, next one. I don't feel my husband is in strong recovery due to how he lacks inability to have emotional resilience when stressed and be empathetic to me when I'm in pain. We are in home separated with little kids in the house, and one big indicator for me of how to gauge his level of recovery is how he meets my boundaries as viewing me as being cold and mean to him and a rejection of him. And my boundaries tell him that I don't want anything to do with him, so he doesn't try to connect. Interested on your take. So there's an in-home separation, and it sounds like the wife has some boundaries that he's not happy about. Sounds like.
Yeah. About there are so many places where immaturity bubbles up for couples in recovery, and please don't take that as a slight. When I say immaturity, largely what I'm looking at is things that you weren't supported in growing up around. I look at when my kids look at what my wife and I get to do as adults and the jealousy they have, and one day that'll be me. I think when kids are given an opportunity to safely develop, they do, because it's really awesome being an autonomous adult. So when I say immaturity, things in us that weren't supported to let us grow up. So boundaries is a place I see that bubble up a lot. And there's a misunderstanding on both sides. For people setting boundaries, they can see it. And often this is hard to detect if you struggle with it. They may see it as a way to control. I was just working with somebody the other day who I talked to them about the most basic form of a boundary is saying how you feel. And this person said to me, well, what if they don't change their behavior as a result? And I said, you're missing the point. It's not about changing another person. It's about defining the best way to approach you and the best way to connect with you. And what somebody does with that information, it's your boundaries aren't to get people to do it right 100% of the time. It's to give them a clear choice. Do it this way and get my admiration and gratitude and my interest in you, or do it this way and get something else, dealer's choice. So the boundaries as control can be a form of maturity on the enacting side. On the receiving side, you have boundaries with me because you don't like me, is how the immaturity comes up. And to illustrate that point, I think of my 2-year-old when I tell her we had to move our knife drawer because she has figured out, Scott, she's figured out 4 of the 5 baby locks we've tried to put on things. And it's maddening, like this new one that we put on that I was like, great, this will work. I mean, it was probably within hours of putting up a serial with her little finger, doing that thing that kids her age shouldn't know how to do. So when I say to her, you cannot get in the knife drawer, sweetie, it's dangerous, she doesn't respond with oh, thanks for telling me, Dad. I'm glad you're looking out for me and, making sure things are safe and working. It's this like, why are you so mean to me? Why are you horrible to me? So boundaries, as you only have boundaries because you don't like me, or if we had a better relationship, you wouldn't need boundaries. That's fallacy. The happiest, healthiest relationships I know of have all sorts of boundaries. And they're not these arbitrary spelling out behavior. It's a knowledge of, we have limits, we have bottom lines. I did a episode several months ago, maybe beginning this year, why bottom lines are important in relationships. It's just that so my take on this is yeah, it's not a bad indicator of how recovery is going if there's not that emotional development happening. And I would also say the sobriety and the emotional development don't always happen in lockstep. And I know plenty of people who are very sober who are just as emotionally weird as it gets, because you actually have to turn your focus on that. And you have to decide, like, I've got to work on that part of me. It's not just being sober is great. It's a big accomplishment, but it is not the card that gets you access to everywhere.
Yeah. And at least your 2-year-old is really smart.
Oh my
And
God. Scary.
curious and ingenuity. Good
Scary.
sign.
Yeah.
Um, when asked what my husband is doing to help repair the relationship, he points to things like going to work, being a good person, being a good father to the kids, which I agree are essential to being a good foundation for being in a relationship. But he makes no other attempts to regularly and consistently connect with me outside of these areas. Our therapist asked him to start with saying good morning and good night daily, but he gets rejected, so stops if I'm not super warm to him. Am I asking for too much?
Sometimes what betrayed partners need to see is I need to see that you are willing to hold this space open regardless of what that creates. And that's actually what secure functioning is we're going to treat each other in a certain way regardless of how we feel. So what I would say here to both of you is, or if you're in a situation like this, what I would say to both sides is you have to be really careful when you're deciding to change up rules or commitments simply because you feel a certain way or don't feel a certain way. And in the instance of a spouse who's been betrayed, I think you get just a little more leeway, but it's not a permanent pass. You get a little more leeway if it's hard for you to greet your partner with cheer or to say, thank you for acknowledging me, because there's been a betrayal that was a secret and, all of that kind of disorientation. But it's super, super dangerous for couples when they show each other, I will only do what I feel, not what works best for us, what is right for us, what we've committed to. So that's what I say about that. I don't think that it's asking for too much. That's exactly where, the first thing that hit me is when I ask you, what are you doing to repair the relationship? That's part of it. He should have a sense of it. And there should also be a really specific, and here's what I need specifically from you. And that's such an important thing to be able to give from the betrayed side of the equation. And it's okay to point that out. I'm glad you have this sense of these things are really important in supporting our relationship. You have like 70% of the picture, which is not bad for on your own. There's another 30% that you are only going to understand if you listen to me. That you're only going to get if you know that this is what I want, not what you think makes a good relationship, because the goodness of the relationship is in the eye of the beholder, both. So if one person is saying, I'm not satisfied, this isn't working, that's valid. There's no defense for that.
Yeah. Okay, what is the best advice you can give the partner of a sex addict who is struggling to trust the addict's sobriety? My partner is about a month into a 90-day reset. I can't shake the feeling that he's just turned into a better liar because he knows there will be major conflict or I will leave him if he acts out again. He leans into depression and will often neglect chores around the house, following through with important things, etc. I feel like he's using this as an excuse. He becomes defensive or deflects if I express how I feel.
Yeah,
This is a
so
really common situation where, the betrayed partner is struggling to trust that the addict is sober.
absolutely. I would say right here, like time and observation is your best friend. Everything comes out in the wash. So on that, like if I'm struggling to trust my partner's sobriety, a month into a 90-day reset generally isn't enough time to trust that. So sometimes I'll make to the point to the guys I work with who are struggling with addiction. For as long as you were in addiction and keeping it secret, that like give your partner at least that much time.
Yeah.
For trust. After that point, maybe we could look at is something wrong here. And then as far as like the neglect or the depression and feeling like it's an excuse when I express how I feel, again, it's my comment earlier on secure functioning. There have to be some bedrock things that couples agree on, and we do these regardless of how we feel. or we give accountability and we don't use our feelings as an excuse to, I mean, a dumb example around my house, or like doing the dishes every night are probably the most bedrock thing I have going on. Like I have to do this regardless of how I feel, because it creates such chaos if that doesn't happen. So times that it doesn't happen, I may have an explanation. I was really tired, or it just didn't work out. That explanation is not to say, so it's okay. It's, here's where I was at. I do need to get back on track.
No question here, but just wanted to say this is an excellent discussion, incredibly helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Last one here. How do we reintroduce sexual intimacy without risking my partner's sobriety? I'm not sure how to move forward in a healthy way. I don't feel like him self-pleasuring himself is a good idea, at least for some time, because this is a compulsive behavior for him. If the only sexual stimulation he gets with me, then that's a lot of pressure on me. I have completely lost my mojo and seldom want that form of intimacy.
Yeah, I mean, here again, I would say time is your best friend. And I think generally for folks in addiction recovery, if you can't talk about it in an integrated, emotionally present, and responsible way, you probably shouldn't be doing it. So that comment there about if the only sexual stimulation is with me, that's a lot of pressure on me. That's always got to be a we thing. So, again, I say this to folks who I work with who are struggling with addiction all the time, when they say like, my partner's anxious and afraid and mistrusting, and and when I want to have sex, she doesn't want to with me, or when she does, she's really shut down. And I'll often ask, like, is that the kind of sex you want to be having? And so again, that idea, like if we've decided that sex is between you and I, and we're both not ready, it's a we thing. It's not a one or the other. And that frame up of what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? How are we going to support each other? Yields much better solutions than looking at it in terms of like who's got to move or who's responsible.
Yeah. When I hear this question, usually from the addicts, because that's who I work with, um, my answer is the emotional intimacy restored yet? Do you guys trust each other yet? Is the relationship safe yet?
Yeah.
Okay, then probably sex isn't on the table right now. Or, I mean, if you're, when those things are back or are restored or are there for the first time in a lot of relationships, then the sex life, the sexual desire usually returns and it's
Yeah.
mutual.
You'll always struggle with sex or easiness or comfort around sex if there's not safety,
Right.
there's not
Yeah.
intimacy.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as an FYI on that topic, in January, we're going to teach through Seeking Integrity a 6-week course for addicts, sorry, not for betrayed partners, on rebuilding intimacy and reintroducing sexuality in a healthy way in the relationship. So if your addict is interested, that might be something for him to sign up for. I think we're going to do it starting in January at some point. Do you ever do any workshops like that, John, or you stick with the enmeshment stuff?
Enmeshment is getting my workshop attention. I have lots of ideas for workshops, but as you know, they're so energy intensive.
They are. Yes, they are.
Energy for new things is something I am definitely short on these days.
Yes, you have children. I don't. So my cats are easier than your 2-year-old. So, although not always.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have house plants that can attest to. you know, don't eat that; it's poisonous.
Well, we have those same conversations with my 2-year-old. You cannot put anything you find outside in your mouth. It's not
Yeah,
good.
it's a Lego that you found outside. It's not food. So, all right. Thank you, John. It's good to see you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and hopefully, I will be 100% healthy by then. That would be nice. We'll see you.
Thanks. Bye.